Welcome to My View from the Piano Bench. We do this on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. here on my Joel Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evening. Happy 2023. My goodness. And we're still going. This is cool. Thank you to all of you who support and encourage me via the links you will find on the support page of my website, and you'll see a link to that page in the video description. And I'm going to write something down because when I don't, then I forget. And that's just like me, to forget. But I do remember what the topic is. And if you've been watching lately, you know that I have been looking at particular songs that I play often or have a relationship with or enjoy or have some significance. And I think going forward, for the most part, not all the time, but for the most part, this will be a good way for me to touch on different topics because I'm going to let it go wherever it takes me. It's not about a tutorial of the song necessarily, although in part I guess it could be. It's just about where it takes me in my experiences and my thoughts and etc. And this particular song is certainly the song I have played more often than any other, by far. And there is a good reason for it. And it is the Irving Berlin tune, Always, or I'll Be Loving You Always. And I'll play one chorus. So this is one of those where do I start situations, but actually it's pretty clear where I should start. And that doesn't have anything to do with the song, but rather the circumstance that had me choose this song, which is when I began work in music therapy, exclusively in geriatrics. And if you follow me, you know that story and the significance that that has played in my life in terms of my attitude about playing, in terms of validating why I do this, and also for a period of 10 to 15 years, a double-edged sword, but really positive, because it brought me into contractual relationships with literally dozens of senior communities in my really greater region, because I was going across 4 states, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and Maryland. And many of these communities were continuing care, and I would go to them recurringly, most of them once a month, some more often. And I might be in multiple units of a facility when I'm there, and it pulled me away from the artistic pursuits of music in terms of having time to practice. It pulled me away, or you might say, in a sense, continued to distract me, either way, kind of both, from pursuing more of a public career in music. It was still in my practical, where can I bill enough hours? How can I work enough? So in terms of music, I was not doing then what I'm doing now, kind of later in life. I mean, I've done this to a degree all along. I want to be known for what I do, in that I want to have opportunities to do it. But, the last 15 years or so has been much more, or 10, 15, whatever it is, the last episode, chapter, has been much more about uh, building the relationships with you. Uh, you meaning you can find me online, or you can find me in a public event, in a performance venue, whatever. But those 10, 15 years of really being active in music therapy was a time that I could, when it really needed to happen, uh, create enough income. And as a gigging musician, you never get rich, but it was what was needed while the kids were young and the kids were in school. Nobody was thrilled that dad was out all the time. There were some ridiculous days that I would have, because I was continuing the gig, so I could have, several facilities during the day and have a restaurant gig at night, and still keeping up with everything else. But it served a wonderful purpose, many wonderful purposes actually, and it did provide what I needed at the time. And music has always, in some way, not always the way I planned, provided. You do what you're supposed to do, be where you're supposed to be, and things will work out. Maybe that was a long setup, but in going, well, everything I do is a long setup, I know. But when I realized that I was going to pick up this network of senior communities, which came out of when I did a year or so at the Showboat in Atlantic City, and realized seniors are my audience. And this was back in the early to mid 90s when it all started. I am kind of a creature of habit or routine, and I need to do that because it creates kind of a broader conceptual framework that everything fits in, so things aren't just random. And so when I started doing group programs, I had a stock beginning and a stock ending. I varied everything in between, very much so. There was nothing the same about a program from week to week or month to month, or whenever I would rewrite them, or retool them, retheme them. But I would always start with "When You're Smiling" and always end with "Always." And this means, when I talk about that this is the song that I played more than any other, if I am doing probably at least 400 senior community programs a year in different areas, or maybe somewhere between 300 and 500. Not counting anything else. But I'm in the nursing unit of one facility, and I go to assisted living, and then I do something in the evening for an independent living, and I do something over here. And every time I did that, I ended with this song. And the song never got old, because for me, a tune is a tune. Now I've got a fork in the road with 17 prongs, because there's all kind of directions that I can go. Let's go here. I learned quickly that there is a memory window for dementia patients, Alzheimer's in particular, and that strongest long-term memory window is late teens, early 20s, kind of like college years, right? So it's not when you're a child like you might think. And so I'm going in that window, picking tunes, and that tune always, about half the people that I played for had that at their wedding, right? And so it's probably no more familiar a tune. It's still familiar to many people, but back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, every senior citizen, knew that song. And you could walk into like a memory impaired unit or uh, this sounds kind of clinical, but it is a low functioning area, or group, and nobody's responsive, but you stand there in the middle and you sing, I'll be loving you. And most people will lift up their head and respond always, who can't hold a conversation with you. And that, of course, speaks to the nature of music and how music brings you into the rest of your brain and personality, because that part of the brain is still functional, which is amazing. It's the last to not be functional. And of course, I had my little, routine. And in fact, I didn't just do it in senior communities. I'm probably short selling this. Whenever I had a program, like when I did American Cruise Lines for 11 years, and I would go on the ships and kind of sell myself every time, because for the most part, it was people who didn't know me. Occasionally, I see somebody I saw before, and I would still end with always, and I would say, okay, this last song is a song that everybody knows, and I can prove it. Ready? Here's the proof. And I start singing, I'll be loving you. I stop. Everybody says always, and I go, oh shucks, gosh, I didn't know you cared. And I play. Right. And I had my stock arrangement. I realized when I started recording that I haven't played my stock arrangement in years, because I'm really not doing this tune anymore. It's funny, when I decided, I need to play always, it's like I forgot to actually play always. And not that I need to refresh myself, but I'm a little bit concerned I'm going to mess something up. But I'm going to go back to my arrangement that I do every time, which is do it in 3 keys. D flat, E flat, and F. And then I would open it up a little bit, solo-ish in E flat, and then I would bring it back in F. I keep it as a waltz. Now here's another potential rabbit hole here. This song is full of them, which is good because I need to talk for a while, right? When jazz musicians would play this tune, they almost always would swing it. They would. You do it in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The problem with that is, best that I could determine, because I wasn't there in 1929 or 7 or 6 or whenever the song was written, and I wasn't there for all those people's weddings, but best as I can tell, that's not how they did it. It was a waltz. And, I guess not really thinking about it this way, but this is one of those connections of why I relate to Dave McKenna saying, the older I get, the less I consider myself a jazz player and more a song player. Or the more I consider myself a song player and less a jazz player. Because, the tune... Like, if you're going to improvise on it, you don't have to put it in this particular feel. You can improvise on it, whatever it is. So that reminds me of a tune, another Irving Berlin tune, Remember. Back in one of my Mainstay Monday shows, where I had a jazz saxophonist who was a professor at, well, actually lecturer, but he taught at the college in my town, where I'm on the faculty as well. And he wanted to do this program kind of dedicated to a CD of Joe Fromm and Brad Moldau, which is excellent CD, and I forget what the title of it is, but it's just piano, saxophone duo, mostly standards, right? And this particular musician was, uh, very very knowledgeable jazz player, but not knowledgeable at all about the culture of where those tunes came from, which is, the longer I go on, I guess the more that I realize that I really do agree with Dave McKenna in so many aspects with that quote. Uh, in fact, I had a little discussion lecture with a younger bass player. Did I say lecture? Yeah. Just the other week about this, that you bring your jazz sensibilities, which are bebop and beyond, to these older tunes, which are not the way those tunes were approached, right? And so the song "Remember," I think it was swung, you know, right? And I'm like, what would never played the tune that way? Okay, that's a jazz way of doing it, but that song's a beautiful waltz. So I struck a little compromise with the sax player. And he thought this was cool because probably nobody else that he worked with would have done this. And it's like, why doesn't everybody? Which is, all right, let's play the tune and let me set it up and I'll play it the way it was actually written by Irving Berlin. And then we can do the jazz thing with it. Cool. And probably the first time he heard first time you heard it as a waltz. But the tune is a waltz. I don't know who swung it back in the 20s and 30s. Now, Remember is a waltz like always. Remember was written by Irving Berlin, like always. I mean, and I guess that musicians just don't like to play waltzes. Well, it's not entirely true, but it kind of is. It's like, man, if it's a waltz, do the waltz, right? So I remember back when I was doing the festivals for 3 years. And in fact, the festival I'm going to next week, as I record this, the Jazz Jubilee by the Sea in Pismo Beach. It might have actually been at this festival that this was happening. I haven't been there in 14 years. I'm going back. It's just like my relationship with the Mediri brothers is just a long, not familiar, but familial story. The other brother, I guess that truly is me. We call the CD that. And a lot of you know all about that. I don't talk about it, but maybe I should for those of you who don't. But back when I was doing that, and I've been in and out of their bands. So like when I showed up on the traveling circuit, people didn't know me until they did. More locally, more people know me. Right? And so I was sort of like the new guy, even though I was really the old guy. The guy who was there first with the boys. But in terms of what people saw, and there was this one sweet woman, Ruthie. She has since passed away. And she looked me up online, and now I don't remember. No, it's not my most viewed, but one of the very first YouTube videos I ever posted was of the song "Always." When I started posting on YouTube in 2007, I went all guns blazing with it, and I had a video from a church concert that was taken for me, so it was a decent quality video, ish, and "Always" is one of the tunes, and I posted it in the first batch of posts, and that is one of my most viewed. I don't know how many thousand. I mean, I don't have anything that's like zillions. I have one that's pushing 50,000, 60,000 views. and always maybe in the 30s now, maybe, I don't know. But Ruthie found it, loved it. There's some other people. I've met some people who I'm Facebook friends now, stuff that I've never actually met. But one took that tune and emailed me and asked if they could use it as a soundtrack for a birthday tribute to her mother, or anniversary to her parents, perhaps. And yeah, that particular tune, that particular post, has just hit people, you know, which is was very cool. So Ruthie loved that, and then she would request Medeiros play it, and then I knew where this was going. It's like, well, they're going to swing. Wait a minute, Joe. That's not what she's looking for. She's looking for. Well, that's not what we do. That's what anybody does. I think I talked him into actually doing it as a waltz a couple of times, but then I had to explain to Ruthie, this is kind of, yeah, we all have our own different approaches, right? And I remember Ruth actually saying, no, I like this. Actually, she loved everything the Medeiros did too, not taking anything from that. So let's see if I remember it in the 3 keys. I might not. I could really embarrass myself, because I do that all the time. It's my living. Something like that. I'm pleased that I didn't drive that off a cliff. but I can also feel that, if I went for a couple of weeks doing what I did before, playing it all the time, it would come out even more fluidly, but that was fine. That's kind of how I did it. Every time, every time, every time. Never, ever, ever got old. Nothing gets old, because every opportunity to play is a unique moment, right? It's the unique place to be in a moment, find that new spot, and it's never the same way twice. It's just releasing to the moment. It's not succumbing to like some formula that you're going to use, right? It's not just repeating licks that you played, although it happens, and I try to avoid it happening. Speaking of avoiding things happening, so I had this little thought debate with myself while I'm playing, because I've had a discussion with a gentleman who was very likely watching this, and these discussions, email discussions, have kind of influenced some of the things I've done here, and he asked some really good questions, and one was about a device that I use frequently. And the ironic thing about it is that I actually try not to do those things. I fall back on them and they happen. And I don't stop them from happening. But I'm also not a fan of formula, although you fall into it. You have to, right? And one of those devices is the little chromatic where in this case I'm playing some version of an F7, an F13 technically. Okay, Sweet Georgia Brown is not the tune we're talking about, but you know I did that. Or maybe you don't, because I don't know why. Am I getting off the subject? What was I talking about? So, I played the tune Coquette, I think. And it was pointed out, let me see. Right? In the, what we call the Montgomery Ward or Sears or Roebuck Bridge. But I realized when I was preparing to do this that I do that in the tune Always, which doesn't have that structure, but it just happens. Let me see. And it's funny. I guess because I was more aware of it and I've been talking about it lately, I'm like, oh, here comes that little thing. I guess I'll do it. But if I had to think about it, probably a lot of the times when I would play the song, I wouldn't do it. I would play around it or something. I wouldn't play it the same way. And yeah, there's a conundrum about chord changes or the harmonic structure of a tune, particularly when you're primarily a solo player, and you can decide that the tune is whatever you decide it to be until you play it with other people. There's a stock way to do it. And I think most pianists who both play solo and play with other people have played with other people, more extensively, have networked more, and kind of keep in their head what the stock arrangement of something is, so they can go to it. But for me, the way I'm used to doing something, I go to the stock, I play with other people, and then I have to like, oh wait, well, I'm not playing the same thing. One of those places in this tune, let's see. Next is further along. Here's not done. There it is. Not for just a day, not for just a day. So if I'm an F, I play a D7 chord there, to a G, to a C, around the circle of fourths and fifths, move it in fourths. F to D, G, C. Come to find out that's not the way Irving Berlin wrote it, which I don't care. Boy, that sounds sacrilege. Contemporary jazz is like reharmonization out the wazoo, and you're just playing all sorts of things that the composer didn't wrote, right? And that's actually okay. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make it your own. But okay, so instead of going to D7 in the key of F, like I like to do, not for just a they go to the G7, which you would think them to go to C, but it doesn't quite yet. It goes to G minor. And if I remember that I have to do that, then I can use my brain, get out of the being of the moment for a minute, and remember to do what everybody else is doing. And so that was going through my mind while I was playing. It's like, hey, no, I don't have to do that. I can do what I typically do. It's so weird with tunes. I find myself putting more and more of a premium, the older I get, on playing tunes through again before I do them on a gig, if I haven't played them in a while, which I never used to do. But that's not good. You need to keep things in the front of your head. But then there's just so much things in the front of your head that you fall face forward and face plant. So many things to do, so little time. So anyway, let me play through the tune again, and it'll touch in my head some of the other things that I can talk about with this tune. So here's the cool thing that happens with tunes. I was in D flat at that time. Let's play in E flat. 1, 2, 3. Let's waltz, right? And so harmonically, it's very basic. 1, 2, 3. One chord and a 5 chord. All of a sudden, you're in G. I mean, all of a sudden. And you stay there. And that's probably right on the borderline. I know we're going to get slightly musician wonky, but I think everyone can stay with me. Right on the borderline of what you would consider technically a modulation. So, music theory, music pedagogy, or all of that, people, you get a consensus, but then people argue about it. And I know there's a strict consensus of what constitutes a modulation. Meaning where your tonal center changes. And there's examples of that in different tunes. So I'm thinking of Unforgettable, that has this really stealth modulation where you start in the key of G, you actually end it in the key of C. And you don't know you change until you're at the end and you're not where you started. That's a very unique and cool tune. But let's go back to Always. Because once I point it out, you can hear what happened. So if we talk about the idea of a key, we can also use the word tonal center. So this note, the root of the key I'm in, which is E flat right now, as I move around different notes, all good, but this note is like the gravitational force that always pulls you back. The jarring thing about that is that not only does it just happen, which is a common occurrence, it gets your attention because it happened, but usually when that happens, it works its way immediately back into leading you back to that tonal center, right? This is unusual because it actually creates a new tonal center, a undeniable new tonal center. E flat, G. And the reason I can say that is because it goes through a tension release cycle. So it's like definitely there. I don't know if it stays there long enough to technically be a modulation, but for all practical purposes, it is. It moves the tonal center. There it is. Right? Except, takes you back. So here's something interesting. When it takes you to the new tonal center, you're like, okay, here I am. It doesn't just plop you back. It leads you back the way you would expect to have been led there in the first place. Bang. With this little sequence of repeating always, always, it sets you back up in the original key. Which you could argue actually had to happen, where even though we disrupted the tonal center, that was still there to pull us back. And that's the argument against it, that was technically a modulation. Because you didn't really stay there long enough to not be successfully pulled back. Does that make sense? So let me play the whole phrase in the beginning. Maybe this is interesting, hopefully. So, here it is. I'm going to finish your tunes. There's that device. Why did I do that for? So, I guess I answered my own musing there, or question, or, thought about whether or not it's a modulation. Because it solidly moves the tonal center, but you still actually feel correct what just happened, right? So, actually the key, I guess, technically you never left. Yeah, music theorists will argue this kind of stuff. But this is kind of what people do who are passionate about whatever it is, they argue about it, right? And so I realized something as I'm talking about this, and that is that I've always blunted the shock value of that sudden shift. And I have this tendency to want to set up movement by leading tones. Yeah, and potentially to a fault, I guess. I don't think about it that way. Now, I remember when working on the Blossom Deary project, and that recording is ready to go into the promotional phase. So you're going to start hearing about that. And in a few months, it'll be available, and it's a magical recording. I can't wait for you to hear it. But anyway, my first time working in this particular studio that Sharon had a long history with, fine studio, great engineer, Morningstar Studios in Philly, Glenn Barrett. So it was Glenn's and my first opportunity to kind of get to know each other, you know, working together. And I made a comment, and of course he, yep, you do. I said, I live and die by leading tones. And I really do. So, here's my point. So we're in the original, or the first key, E flat in this case. Okay. I realize I don't let that happen. I blunt it with the same 2/5 movement that I used to get back. You know, So now I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do that. I never question that I blunt that dramatic movement. Here it is again. I slowed down to kind of emphasize it. So let me play from the beginning again. Interesting to see what I do. So I set up that pseudomodulation with a device called a 2/5. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. But it's the standard SOP, standing operating procedure. And then once I did that, you notice I didn't really stay just with the 1-5. I started like maneuvering a little bit within it to keep the subtle movement happening. And there I go. I live and die by leading tones. You can argue there's 3 leading tones there. Or 2. You know, but all this melodic movement that pushes the chords, you know, from one to another, and one to another. Suppose. Now that's funny. That's going to be in my head now. When I play this tune, it's like, hey Joe, just let it hang there, and whack. It's not what I usually do. Oh, I'm challenging myself. So let me play it in key of F. Let me just see what I want to do. Okay, right away then. If I don't interfere with myself, I did what I call blunting it. You know, whatever I did, but I didn't do whack. Well, that's interesting, right? So here's something. When I'm playing with other musicians, you know, And musicians have to agree with each other on, why am I back there? On the chords or the harmony. Particularly if I'm working with a guitar player who's also playing chords. If I'm working with a bass player, it's a little bit different. Or, I mean, just a bass player. But I'm realizing that I can get away with doing my little setup in the band when nobody else is. Interesting. Is this getting too wonky? Probably. Ridiculous? Certainly. But, you know, welcome to my world. It's little nuances are like all over the place, and, you know, like little gremlins sitting on the fence laughing at you while you're doing your thing. Yeah. So maybe I should, speaking of what other musicians do, to Schumann, swing it. Ha. Okay, that's all fun. I like that. But that is not how, as far as I can tell, or would be aware of, people who lived that in their lives experienced that tune. And that's where I get stuck. So, in the work of music therapy, the cool thing that happens is that music, if you have damage in, you know, certain cognitive areas of your brain, music brings you back to yourself because that part of the brain still works. And if you're functioning in music and you're interacting there, everything kind of gets redirected, everything kind of wakes up, and you can become yourself. And I've had some beautiful experiences, and I've told you the one that essentially became my my research paper for music therapy, when I had a long-standing one-on-one visit situation with someone. I'm not going to go really deep into it, but the bottom line is that this person was brought along to the point where I had a rapport with this person after building it for weeks and weeks of visiting, using music, where nobody had reached that person for years. And then I brought a family member in who came to visit every week but was not recognized, and that person was received because we were interacting in this in this music. Music reunited people, right? These two people, and that was a bit of a recurring theme. Although, in that particular situation, which was in essence my clinical work, that was done on purpose, and I was like, let's try this. I think this will work, and it did, right? But when I was just doing my thing, and I was ending all of these programs with always, right? Because I remember the home, the particular facility, and it was a husband and wife. The wife had Alzheimer's, was in the nursing unit. The husband, visited her every day, spent the time with her, and I don't know how much they communicated. I get the impression it wasn't a lot, but I would end every program with always, and I found that later that was their moment every week when I was there, where they were connected to each other. Of course, that song was probably played at their wedding. So there's multiple connections to long-term memory, not just that the song was there. So it was a special thing. And I guess I didn't know that until her funeral. And I was asked to take part, and I couldn't. I had a conflict. And that was sad. But always was played at her funeral because of that. And it's like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And now this just has me sort of internally musing on something off to the side here. And that is, it's actually kind of, I don't want to say amazing, but a testament, I guess, to how strongly that I connect with myself as a performing musician. I saw it as a calling. I play piano. It's what I do. So I never, ever, ever, ever questioned when I started the music therapy thing that I was going to put the emphasis on being a performing musician aside, and I was going to dive into music therapy. And I would always say, and this is true, there are several research projects I'd really be interested in doing, because the way I went about obtaining my certification and getting in that was a bit of a side door. It wasn't something I purposely do or knew I was doing purposely until I did it, right? And I just lost my train of thought. Goodbye, I see the puff of smoke. Anyway. Yep. So I sort of am back now. I never questioned that it was just a given. I never even considered deliberating, maybe I should change what I do. Because I had accepted in my early 20s playing music as a calling. It's what I'm supposed to do. So the music therapy thing was a side trip. But it really wasn't. It was part of the whole picture. But if I had a spare moment, it was to practice. It wasn't to start a research project. Although I'm definitely prone to all sorts of crazy detours. I did a radio program for a few years. Why? Because it was a crazy detour. Did it make sense? No. Does much of what I do make sense? No. But as I recount the story about always, and I'm more attuned to this now, what my friend Amy Schick calls the pain in my heart, right? Follow the pain in your heart. Not that it's a pain. Well, you know what I mean. And it's like, man, yeah. And I think the only thing that kept me from just devoting myself to music therapy was that I already knew who I was. I was a guy who played tunes. Don't shoot me, I'm only the piano player. Or don't shoot myself. So, man, this is a place I didn't intend to go, and I'm about to end, but let me just go here. The big shock that I got was when I was, before I had my certification, when I was in the facility where I was working with that woman that I mentioned, where I brought a family member in, and we had sort of like this miracle thing go on. And I was working my way through that, and it was all new. The whole experience was new. So I've been seeing this person for months, right? And the miracle of it was that she would only call out help me from her room all the time, and couldn't be integrated into activities, was aggressive, even violent to caregivers. It was just not a good situation. And music was the bridge to bring her back to the extent that we could. Absolutely improve her quality of life. But I came in one day, and I almost used the name. I can't use the name, so I'm going to just make up a name. Susan, uh, the director's say, Susan is checking out today. And my first thought was, wow, where's she going? Then I realized what I was being told. She was going. And I had the opportunity to go in there. And of course there are people with her, and it was the end. And unfortunately, she looked very frightened. I can't believe I'm talking about this, but there's no reason I can't, right? She looked very frightened. It was not a peaceful situation. And I was petrified myself, because that was my moment of, what am I doing here? I'm a piano player. Man, now I'm okay. I can, that was my first exposure to that. It's, I just had to have my shock thing with it. But it's like, whoa, and all I could do was play a hymn and leave. And I went about my business, came back, door was shut. So like minutes after I left, Susan, I almost said her name, Susan checked out. And those profound experiences, those and many, many others, man, it does have to do with Always, because Always is my signature song of music therapy. That was kind of the bottom line. Yeah, this is true. Maybe I just need to sit here and rethink my whole life at this second, sort of, maybe. Because the most profound and meaningful experiences that I'll ever have in music, I can't say have likely already happened. I would say that because I'm not really working in music therapy, but let's leave that part out. Have happened or will happen when nobody's looking, when nobody's there to watch, not on stage. And it's those moments that really validate. So this is really weird now, because it's like those moments in music therapy have really helped validate me being a musician, even though I consider myself a performing musician before a music therapist. But really, I consider it all the same thing. One informs the other, and I'm nothing if not a conceptualist. I've got no lens but a wide angle lens. And I guess that's where it all settles with me, that it's all one big thing. And I started out as a pianist, I ended a pianist, and that's why it was important for me to keep my music therapy certification. Even though I'm not doing any work in it now, but my 5-year cycle just ended as of 2 days ago when I record this, reset for 2023. And I really fell behind. Circumstances had changed on me, so I was behind in getting my continuing education credits. I started late. I paced myself, I pushed myself, and I got the last one in like 2 days before Christmas. And it's like, this is really time consuming, and I could let my music therapy certification lapse. I'm not using it again, but no, it's too important. It means something to me. Because it's who I am as a performer. I guess it's who I am as a person. I don't like to talk that way about myself. But it is about the connection. And let's leave it right there. It's about the connection that we have here. And, that particular song was just a way for me to methodically make that connection over and over again. Yes, a routine, but it never got old. It was a new moment every time. And I played that tune literally thousands of times, very possibly more than 10,000 times if you think about it. And you add up all the different uh, times I did programs, and always ended with always. Not for just an hour, not for just today, not for just the year. And there it is. I'll be loving you always. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your support. And hope to see you soon. You go to my website. I just updated performances, and yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot of performance updates on there. It's really cool what's going on. Hope we can stay connected always. Thank you.